and welcome to another episode of Josh Wonders Why. I am here as usual with Pastor Kelly, and we're here to answer all of your questions about anything that may be on your mind. So if you're new to this experience, it's a weekly discussion that Kelly and I have about a variety of topics. Whatever's on our mind, whatever's on your mind, whatever you ask, we like to discuss here. So if there are any topics, any questions you have that you've always been wanting to ask, just put them in the comments here, and we'd love to discuss them in the future. Josh Wonders Why. Tonight, we're going to change it up a little bit. We've been talking a lot in the past, I think, couple weeks about biblically based questions, like talking about Genesis and did it happen in Genesis, and also answering some questions last week from Ask the Pastor about, is the Bible all myth and made up and whatnot. So change it up a little bit tonight. We'll be talking about current events and just discussing them. Some of the news articles, I found a couple articles just about centered around Christianity or Christian topics that come up in the past month, and I sent the links to Kelly so she could read through them as well, and we're just going to read through them and talk about them. And, love to get your thoughts on this stuff too.
Please share your opinions and thoughts and ideas. And
I'm going to try to get this going. If I can get my chat, I may just hold up. There we go. Okay, sorry for the... Okay, so let's get started. So the first article I found, we'll go in, oldest to earliest, or oldest to newest, sorry. So the first article is from July 28th of this year, and the title is, Trump Administration Allows Federal Workers to Promote Religious Beliefs. And I'm just going to read maybe some of the article, and then we can discuss it.
Okay.
Because I'm sure you'll have some thoughts. So it says essentially, the Trump administration will allow federal workers to promote their religious beliefs to colleagues, display religious items at work, and pray together or individually, according to a memo issued Monday by the Office of Personnel Management. The guidance declares that federal agencies should allow personal religious expression by federal employees to the greatest extent possible, unless such expression will impose an undue hardship on business operations. So this means that federal worker may engage another in polite discussion on why his faith is correct and why the non-adherent should rethink his religious beliefs. But if the non-adherent requests such attempts to stop, the employee should honor that request. They'll also be able to invite each other to religious services or pray in groups at the office while not on duty, and they could also display religious items on their desk. So it does say federal law already offers some protections for the religious expression in the workplace. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 forbids employers from discriminating based on religion. They're required to make reasonable accommodations for their employees' religious practices. And essentially, in a news release, the director of the Office of Personnel Management said, the idea is to make the federal workplace not just compliant, but welcoming to Americans of all faiths. So there you have it. Bring religious back to the workplace, or allowing it to be front and center in the workplace of the federal environment. So I have the memo too, which is interesting. But maybe we start with, I don't know, what's your first thought on this?
Well, I guess I didn't realize there was an issue with people not being allowed to display things or to, I guess maybe in some like companies it would be like a dress code and you couldn't wear a cross or whatever, whatever identifies your faith. What I kind of hear in that is this. I hear a push of Christian evangelism, like suggesting it is a-okay for you to, tell your coworker that their beliefs are wrong. Because it said that, right?
Yeah.
You're free to do that. And
What's interesting with the memo, so I print out the memo too, and it says, so I'll pick on one thing. It says, workers may also display religious items at their desk. So in the memo it says, here are some examples of what you can display at your desk. So it says employees should be permitted to display and use items used for religious purposes or icons, so on and so forth, including but not limited to Bibles, artwork, jewelry, posters displaying religious messages, and other items of religion such as crosses, crucifixes, mezuzahs at their desks. It also specifies that an employee may keep a Bible at their desk. They may read it during breaks. An employee may keep rosary beads or tefillin at their desk, and during breaks they may use it to pray. They also have posters that could be crucifix, a Bible verse, Star of David. The stuff in the memo. So what caught me is it says it's religious freedom, but the stuff in the memo is very Christian and Jewish.
Christian or Jewish, or Catholic, Protestant, Jewish. There's no mention of Islam.
Yeah.
Is it okay to have a Quran on your desk? Is it okay to go however many times a day you need to go and pray? I remember at my kids' high school, we had an exchange student who was a Muslim, and she had, I think she went to one of the guidance counselor's offices at a certain time of day, and she went, rolled out her mat, and prayed.
Yeah. Hey everyone, welcome back to attempt number 2 at Josh Wonders Why. I'm assuming the video is starting right now. I'm just going to refresh to make sure it's coming through. Let's
Me
see.
too.
Saying we're live right now.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, we're live again. So this is going to be interesting, Josh Wonders Why, because part of it, the introduction, was in one video, and now we're going to try to continue on. So
we're talking about news articles that have to do with religion.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the one that came out about a month ago about President Donald Trump allowing federal workers, sending out a memo that allows federal workers to promote religious beliefs. And the memo seemed to be more centered around Christian evangelism, right? As far as you can display Bibles, rosaries, you can invite people to prayer, you can tell people why their religion is wrong. But
and I guess in the federal workplace, maybe it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But there's a problem when freedom of religion starts to be not free for other people. So that if my freedom of religion and my right to be able to tell you what you believe is wrong, or how you ought to believe, or even to continually come and want to pray with you, or and that is not your religion, then that kind of becomes a hostage situation for the other person. And it seems to lean like Christian and Jewish. Like those things are listed. It's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to have a Bible. It's okay to have rosary beads. But it doesn't say anything about it's okay to have a Quran, or it's okay to go off and roll out your mat and pray, whenever you need to as a Muslim. And so that's what bothers me. The other thing with this is that I must have followed the rabbit trail of things in that article, because then it talks about the Commission on Religious Liberty.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
which came out like in May, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an executive order that came out in May. And that's more broad. That talks about schools, teachers, parents, and
well, I find it interesting because with this, it seems like at that time it's, he signed this commission, basically saying we're bringing religion back to our country, but mainly it's a task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And I guess I didn't realize there was a big issue with anti-Christian bias in our country, right? And the
Well,
same thing with this, promoting this. I didn't realize that, like you said at the beginning, if people caught that, I didn't realize this was an issue that you couldn't, have a Bible at your desk if you wanted to, right?
Yeah. I think that there's some Christians who have adopted this victim mentality.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say it, white people will do that too. Well, I didn't own any slaves. My family didn't own slaves, so I don't have any responsibility, to systematic racism. And so some Christians have adopted this victim mentality that if there is a push towards something that they think threatens their faith, whether it be gay marriage or abortion or women's rights, then they push back with you're shoving that down my throat. I'm being persecuted.
Yeah.
And that's a victim mentality, and we don't need that as Christians. We aren't victims.
Yeah.
And differing opinions, perspectives, religions shouldn't threaten your faith.
Yeah.
If that's a threat to your faith, then I'm not sure what your faith is based on. So, so I think we have to be careful about that. And I think I have said for years and years, people that will say we need to bring prayer back to school. Number one, there's nothing that says kids can't pray at school. Teachers aren't to lead classrooms in prayer. And I know that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
We had morning prayer. We said the Pledge of Allegiance, we had morning prayer. And we didn't think anything of it because we didn't know any differently. But I have said for years, if you start bringing prayer back to school that is mandatory and teacher-led, then you are going to regret that, because Christianity will not always be the religion of choice for schools. There's going to come a day when Christians may be the minority.
Yeah.
And, or maybe your child's teacher is, a Muslim or Wiccan, and do you want them leading their class in prayer in their faith? You probably don't. So be very careful with that. And, when there's a lot of talk too about, well, the Pilgrims came from England to escape religious persecution. They didn't want to be told by their government, how to worship, because the king, said, okay, you have to be Protestant. Well, then there'd be queens, and they would go, no, we're going to be Catholic. No, we're going to be Protestant. No, we're going to be Catholic. I would have just liked to leave because of the whiplash I'd be getting with all the different monarchs. But anyway, so they're like, we don't want the government, the king, to tell us what religion we have to practice. And so they come over here, and, so there's this, they came over here for religious freedom. Well, they came over here to have religious freedom from their government. But once they got here, there was not a lot of religious tolerance of people that wanted to practice different. It was all Christianity, but like you got the Anabaptists, and then you had all these offshoots of Christianity, people disagreeing over theology and doctrine, and some of them were very horribly treated.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't freedom of religion. And so we have to be really careful with that, I think.
Sure. I do find interesting, it's, let's see if the memo is called the same thing, but it's protecting religious expression in the federal workplace. And they call out the Title VII of Civil Rights Act of 1964, which, like I said before, it's employers are required to make reasonable accommodations for their employees' religious practices and belief unless it would be undue hardship to do so. And I always read that as, I feel like at the, Christianity being we'll say the majority religion, at least now, it's, I never concern myself with that, but I mean, if there are people that, because of their religion, they need to pray a couple times a day, right? With a prayer mat. You've said that, like, at a school, they can accommodate that. Or if they need to do, like, a hand washing or a foot washing ritual, the employer should be able to accommodate that just to not prevent them from practicing where their faith is on their break time, right? But I feel like they're taking the spin and saying, wait, Christians are the victim. We need to have part in this too, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Mary Kate saying it's selective religious freedom in a way.
Yes,
it is.
Uh-huh.
So, got that first one done. Next article came out, I guess, a couple weeks ago, and I think this got some play as well. And basically, the title is Pete Hegseth reposts a video on social media featuring pastors saying women should not be allowed to vote. So, just to say some of the article, so in this post that Hegseth retweeted, it was almost a 7-minute long video examining Doug Wilson, who's the co-founder of the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. The report featured the pastor from Wilson's church advocating the repeal of women's right to vote from the Constitution, and another pastor saying that in his ideal world, people would vote as households. It also featured a female congregant saying that she submits to her husband. So I want to stop there real quick because I want to ask, this church, the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, the belief is that, I think people should vote as households. Females should submit their husbands. We talked about this before. Are they, picking various verses from the Bible and saying this is
biblical leg to stand
what's the biblical
on?
leg they're basing this off of, right? If anything.
Well,
are they just picking? I like this verse from this chapter.
Yes. We've talked about this not too long ago. We talked about biblical marriage and everything, and I think that it's very frustrating to me. They base that on a couple of things that that Paul said supposedly. Now, scholars don't think that Paul really wrote those things. For various reasons, they don't believe it. And one main reason being, if you read things that are actually attributed to Paul, you will wonder why in the world did he have a stroke or something, because that would be like a 180 turn. Yeah. So if you read what Paul said, if you no more male or female, he put submit to one another, and he said women submit to your husbands, and then like everybody wants to stop there. Yeah. But it goes on, and he says husbands have to love their wives like Christ loved the church, which is total submission, because Christ totally submitted to the cross. So that's how husbands are supposed to submit to their wives. But nobody wants to go there. Yeah. And his ideas and Jesus's ideas were so radical for that time. And but you're never gonna convince them otherwise, because that's what they want to believe. Yeah. They want to have that authority. They want to have that control over women. And there has been, there's this great push against feminism as this, I think, because I watched that video of that pastor. Okay. And I don't know if it was him or one of his other, because they interviewed a couple of the pastors there too. I don't know. Somebody said feminism is a cancer on our society. That's actually the next article coming up. We're going to talk about that. Oh, maybe that was it. That's where I read it. But anyway, it feeds into that. It feeds into that. Apparently, I picked a theme this week. But feminism it's just been such, we're blamed for everything. Eve is blamed for the fall of man, right? Because she took the fruit and ate it. So it's all her fault. if women working outside the home, oh, well, that's why children are the way they are now. And, women are just blamed for everything. And that's where they want to be. They want to control the women, and they don't want women to be able to, to have a say. And to me, that speaks poorly of the men that hold that position. If as a man you have to denigrate women as a whole group, then what does that say about you?
Yeah.
What does that say about you and your masculinity? The same thing with the groups who are like, well, girls have to be careful what they wear and how they look, and because boys can't help themselves, and so it's the girls' responsibility to make sure that they don't see anything that will make them, act in a bad way. Why in the world do girls have to protect the boys? What does that say about masculinity in these groups too?
Yeah.
And present company excluded, I know. And my husband is absolutely not like that. And but that's what they want to believe.
Yeah.
So
I feel like, this article and the previous article, one thing I guess if I'm looking at this as a non-Christian reading these articles, what does it make me think about Christians in general, right? I mean, we got the Pete Hegseth, pretty prominent figure in the government, posting this, and I'm seeing this saying, is this what all Christians believe? Is this what they think it is? And I feel like some of this stuff is, at least in my opinion, is giving Christianity a bad rap in a way.
Yes.
Because of this and other stuff that's coming out, because it's highlighting, and I think they said here, it's someone that was interviewed said, this view is a small fringe of Christians that have this viewpoint, but it's the small fringes of this belief, and then the Christianity as a victim. Those are making a forefront because they're making it more public, and people looking from the outside are like, are these what Christians are?
I get very frustrated with Christians playing the victim and claiming religious persecution, because we don't have any idea what religious persecution is like. We don't live in a country where if you get caught with the Bible, you're going to go to a prison camp and do hard labor. We don't know what religious persecution is like.
Yeah.
And so that really irritates me. What bothered me about Hegseth posting that was just the idea that someone so high up in the government has that attitude towards women, and how many other people in powerful positions in the government also hold that position. I don't know. That's what kind of gave me pause when he reposted that.
Yeah. He said, I guess Mary Kate, let's see, there's a good comment, or there's a comment that I see that just popped up, and there's other comments, but Mary Kate said, we're not helping our cause, I'm disgusted, and I'm a Christian. It seems like they aren't into trying to make disciples, they like the exclusivity.
Yeah.
Which that's
well,
what appears.
because also that pastor,
Doug Wilson,
I watched the video, and there's a point where the interviewer asked him about a comment that he had made some time ago about the affection between masters and slaves. And, and he kind of tried to get out of that by saying how, the people who owned slaves in this country were just horrible people. But he did stand by his comment that there can be great affection between master and slave. And I thought, what?
So Doug Wilson, I think there was a really good podcast on NPR, like a 5-part series that went into him and his church that he started. And it does, the more you read about it, it seems like it is a cult in a way. How they if we go back to the discussion we had, maybe, I don't know, whenever we talk about cults, it checks like every box of being a cult, which is interesting. And
I can see a lot of control in there too.
yeah, but I mean, if you watch a video interview of him, he's really smooth with his words, and it's like I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of talk about this on Thursday actually.
Oh, that's perfect.
You know, that we want to obey the rules. We want to, follow the laws of God, right? We want to please God with our obedience. And so that can make us hypersensitive to anything that we feel might make us slip, and miss the mark. And I think people like that feed into that. That's right. You're going to lose your salvation if you don't, stick to the straight and narrow. And so here, let me tell you what you're doing wrong and how you need to be. And so it leads itself into a cult-like atmosphere of control.
Yeah.
So
that's yeah.
I thought what Tony said was pretty funny though.
What is
that?
The
girls could wear a sleeping bag and an ice mask, and guys will still be stupid. Nice.
Yeah, and America, it gets concerning when all the young men who buy. Yeah, it gets concerning all the young men who buy into it. So what's interesting too is I just went on like AP News or just said, give me a list of Christian or local recent news articles of Christianity in the news, right? And I'd say majority of them are these sort of the things that stand out. The articles, at least on the first search page, are all about these fringe views on Christianity making mainstream discussions. If I'm a non-Christian looking outside looking in, it's like these guys are weird. I do not want to be part of this cult if that's what they are. So the last article we'll talk about, I found really interesting. I probably should just have this be a Josh Winter line itself. But there's an article that was posted on AP News last week on August 21st. And basically the title says, "Can empathy lead to sin? Some conservative Christians argue it can."
That article just kind of like, I was like,
so
what in the world?
So it's interesting because it goes to, we had a discussion a couple weeks ago on different translations or English translations of the Bible. And the one thing was Jesus empathetic? Did he have pity? Are we supposed to be empathetic or pitiful on people?
Yeah.
And so I'll read some of this, but I found it interesting and worth discussing. So it says, there are voices on the Christian right that are preaching that empathy has become a vice. It says, for them, they claim it can manipulate caring people into accepting all manner of sins according to a conservative perspective, including abortion access, LGBTQ plus rights, illegal immigration, and certain views on social and racial justice. So being too empathetic is actually a sin, is what they're saying.
Yeah.
And they've quoted as untethered empathy is how it's been quoted in the article. Which you just care too much about people that you don't care about their sin, apparently, and that's what the issue is.
Ah, yeah. Uh-huh.
So that's where it starts.
This feeds into my message on Thursday.
Well, that's perfect.
Yes.
It says that, so to quote one of the people that believes this or that says this, claims this, empathy becomes toxic when it encourages you to affirm sin, validate lies, and support destructive policies. So that's something. I guess I won't read most of it, but
well, that's where somebody said that feminism is a cancer on society because women are big on empathy. All women are too empathetic. That's why we can't have them running the country because they're too empathetic. They're too compassionate, I guess. And I just thought, what
so
gospel
yeah, so here it goes.
Are you reading?
So the two main people, there's someone, I should read their names. They are, oh man, I already lost this article. Okay, the first one I just said the quote from, her name is Allie Beth Stuckey, and she has a book out that came out in the past year called Toxic Empathy: How Progressives Exploit the Christian Compassion. The other one's name is Joe Rigney, and he also wrote a book called The Sin of Empathy: Compassion and Its Counterfeits. So apparently empathy is a counterfeit.
Somebody in there said that sympathy is okay, but empathy is not.
Yes.
And you notice they sell sympathy cards, but they don't sell empathy cards. That's because empathy means that you are in that other person's position, that you have been in that position, or you can imagine maybe
Yeah.
that position. We don't send people empathy cards when they've lost a loved one, because we're not standing in that place of grief right then and there.
Yeah. So
they are.
So they say that, went back. So empathy first appeared in the English language in 1908 when it took from the German word meaning in feeling. And one of the people that says empathy is a sin says she admits that Jesus was an empathetic figure. In a way, he embodied empathy when he took on flesh, suffered the human experience, and bore the burden of our sins by enduring the gruesome death. She's clear that empathy can be good, but she writes that it has been co-opted to convince people that the progressive position is exclusively the one of kindness and morality. She said, and now says that she traces her own anti-empathy awakening back to the summer of 2020 when racial justice protests roiled the nation. She saw other Christians posting about racism out of an empathy she found misguided. And she says, and I quote, "I reject the idea that America is systematically racist country." I should just end there, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you're not going to change your mind.
Yeah.
If people don't see systematic racism in this country, I don't know how to convince them of it.
Yeah.
But when you see how the systems work against people, whether it's people of color or people with disabilities or whatever, you can't unsee it. And so you may not be a person of color, you may not have a disability yet. I think at some point we all are going to have a disability or two or three.
Yeah.
We're all going to get older, and we're going to have mobility issues and cognitive decline. And, so for people who are ableist and think, well, we don't need to make accommodations, someday you're going to need those accommodations and you're going to be sorry. But, the systems are there that work against these groups, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if you don't have compassion, which, maybe empathy is not the right word, because empathy is more about being in feeling, like it said, in feeling with the other person, like I have experienced this.
Yeah.
And so I can have empathy. If I haven't experienced it, I can sympathize with you. But I think compassion is the goal.
Yeah.
Even if you can't have empathy for someone because you don't know what it feels like, you can have compassion. And, and I really got irritated with that woman.
Yeah.
Because, she was saying, there's like a picture in there of some video she's in, I guess, and saying, well, they tell you their sad story and then, expect you to feel bad for them and they're the victim. And I'm like, well, yeah. But I'm so confused when people don't have compassion, but they claim to follow Jesus. That confuses me.
Yeah. It's confusing. I'll say the other one. So you mentioned blaming feminism, and the other guy. So we talked about the lady that I'll give her name again, just so I can give her credit where credit is due. Yeah, I don't know. I'm messing all my papers up. You're right. So that was Allie Stuckey, who said, she rejects the idea that America is a systemically racist country. The other person that's on here is Joe Rigney, and basically he echoes the critique of systemic racism, but reserves most of his ire for feminism, which he blames for many of empathy's ills.
It's all our fault.
Well, because women are the most empathetic sex, he argues they often take empathy too far. And it's interesting because if you remember, there was an Episcopal bishop, Marion Buddy, that pleaded with the Trump at the beginning of his inaugural prayer service that said, "Have mercy on immigrants and the LGBTQ plus community." And basically, Rigney says, that bishop's attempt to speak truth of her power is a reminder that feminism is a cancer that enables the politics of empathetic manipulation. That would put it there. So I find it interesting that some groups, and maybe it's a niche group, but it's making headlines, is saying you shouldn't be empathetic because, and also that acknowledges, or that assumes that you have to acknowledge that being LGBTQ plus is a sin, right? Or, views on social and racial justice, that's a sin as well, right?
And that's the problem for people who think that progressives, liberals, whatever, are so evil because we don't stand up for, what the Bible says. We're not following the rules. And so, we're just giving everybody a pass.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what grace is. Whether or not you think the Bible says these things are a sin or not, we're all covered by grace. And it's not my job to decide who's in and who's out. It's not my job to say you're wrong for living that lifestyle. That's not my job. Yeah. I am not anybody's personal Holy Spirit. And Jesus didn't say to do that, just to love people. And, it's so frustrating. But again, this feeds in so well to what I'm saying on Thursday.
Well, there we go. Okay, so if you want to know more, we'll listen on Thursday. We'll end this discussion. I found it interesting at the end. There's pushback. It talks about pushback of the progressive Christians. And in New York, there is Reverend Micah Busey. He posted a sign out front of his church basically saying, if empathy is a sin, sin boldly.
Yeah.
I think it's borrowing it from Martin Luther had a quote like that as well, as we said. But so there you go. If empathy is a sin, sin boldly.
Yeah.
So let's see. Mary's saying, so we're not to be empathetic so we can accept the cruelty that this administration is pouring out on innocent people. I think that's something they brought up is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
just reading through some of the comments. Let's see. If any of your ideologies are based on hate for anybody, any persons, any race, any gender, any ethnicity, any social standing, etc., then it is wrong and unchristlike. Hate has no place in Christianity. Well said, Tony.
What Mary's saying there is, it makes me think of, we've talked about atonement theories before about, what does the death on the cross mean and the resurrection and everything. And there are some atonement theories that focus a lot on punishment and, being a victim is like, it's like a good thing, in some people's minds, that's a good thing. And this happens so much with women, women are told, well, you're supposed to submit to your husband. You're probably getting hit because you're not being submissive enough, or you need to try harder, or you need to be, you need to do what your husband's telling you. And then, they're like, well, it's not good that he's hitting you, but just think about how Jesus was beaten, and like, it's really warped, but it's still around. Yeah. It's still alive and, happening today. Yeah. So that's just another Christian ideology that has caused and is causing so much harm to people. So that whole, don't be so empathetic, it feeds into that. Well, if you're being, if you're being hit, if you're, if you came here illegally and now you're incarcerated in a terrible situation, well, that's your fault, so you've kind of asked for this punishment, even though it's inhumane, and so, yeah, I totally agree with what Mary said there.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I think we have a good discussion.
Now you did have like an upbeat article.
I
Which
did.
You might post for everybody to see.
I will.
And there was a quote in there though. Can I see that?
Yeah.
That it goes along with what else with what we've been talking about.
And the article we didn't get to is basically, I'll just say the title is, and this printed out really small, so if you can read this because I'm having trouble. But it's saying, God understands us inside a Nigerian church where deaf people find faith and community. And it's really a cool article about how this one church decided to be inclusive and found there is a portion of the Christian community there that couldn't worship, couldn't hear what's happening, so they made a church just custom for deaf people. And it's really interesting in how they were able to accommodate that people of that disability.
And one of the pastors says, God understands every language. He said, with sign language, God also understands us. And I thought, well, isn't that empathy? So
that's a good catch. Yeah.
Yeah. God understands us. God, Jesus lived as a human and went through all the things that we go through, grief and pain and all that. And so, yeah, God gets us. God has empathy for us. So why shouldn't we have empathy for others?
Yeah. Well said.
That's all I have
so
to
there
say
you go.
tonight.
So we just unpacked a couple articles. What articles did we miss that maybe you caught your eye that maybe you'd be curious to have a discussion, how can we look at it with a Christian eye? So we'll probably be back in about another month just to recap on the news articles from September. Hopefully they're more uplifting. We'll find out. I think I found a tone. But again, like I said, if you just Google Christianity news, the main headlines that come up are all stuff that points to these, seems like fringe viewpoints that are getting made at major headlines, unfortunately. So, I'll post the article about the deaf community. That I was thinking that may be more of like a Saturday Smiles, but I'll post it now just so people can read it and not be so let down by the other articles we talked about. We'll be back again next Monday. It's Labor Day Monday, but we're back, and we're going to be just tasting some food. Kelly has been reminding me for the past, I think, couple months that, hey, we have some food boxes of snacks. Let's get some snacks. So we'll be taste testing some snacks from a different country, not sure what country.
Don't want to miss that because, the looks on our faces, priceless.
Yeah, there you go. So we're back again next Monday, and you can also see Digging Deep this Thursday. So appreciate you watching us. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks, Kelly, for guiding us with this discussion, too.
And remember, as always, these are just my opinions. These are my interpretations of Scripture, and these are the things that I base my actions on. So I'm not saying that it's the only way or you have to believe like I do, but since Josh is asking me, I get to say what I think.
Okay. I need to get a second opinion, it sounds like.
I'm sure I'm right, but, I'll just put that disclaimer out there.
There you go.
Well said. I could be wrong.
Well, thanks again for watching us. Have a good rest of your night. We'll see you later.